First of all, I'm super impressed that you were able to write a novel while you teach and you're a mom and
Yeah. Well, sometimes you just do it without thinking about it, Like I guess if I stop and think about it, I'm like, oh, that's a lot. But also it's like, oh, it's just what I'm doing. And I do that thing where I compare myself to other people. I'm like, oh, she's got like 5 kids and she wrote 3 books this year and she's like running all these organizations. So, but thanks. I mean, no, I have to tell them like, this isn't what I want. Like, I was like, the worst that they're going to do is be like, no, we're not going to do yours.
Yeah, we're using the wheat and that's it. Hi, welcome to Indie Authors. Today we have Shay Galloway. How are you?
Great, I'm doing great.
Good, excellent.
Happy to be here.
Oh, good. I'm super happy you're here too. So, as I always do, I start with the bio. So, you are the author of a debut novel that's coming out March 2023. And it is called The Valley of Sage and Juniper. It's through, I guess it's a small press, Running Wild Press. Yep. Okay. You obtained your bachelor's of English, I was going to say arts, at Utah State University and an MFA at Roosevelt University in Chicago. You currently reside in Washington State with your husband and son, where you teach English at a community college. And you are a writer of slightly off-kilter and historically interested fiction and contemplative nonfiction. And you began journaling and writing stories as soon as you knew how to hold a pencil and before you even knew what you wanted to do, before you wanted to be a writer. So you have had work appear in Origami Journal, Adana, am I pronouncing that right? The Right Launch, A Minor Magazine, the Lindenwood Review, I know that one, and the Naciona. Yeah, okay, good. Didn't butcher it too badly. And what else? That's it. That's you. I mean, yeah. What else? That's it. I mean, that's a lot. It's great. So thank you for coming and being part of this. And first of all, I'm super impressed that you were able to write a novel while you teach and you're a mom. And yeah.
Well, sometimes you just do it without thinking about it, Like I guess if I stop and think about it, I'm like, oh, that's a lot. But also it's like, oh, it's just what I'm doing. And I do that thing where I compare myself to other people. I'm like, oh, she's got like 5 kids and she wrote 3 books this year and she's like running all these organizations. So, but thanks. I mean,
it's easy to fall into that trap, right? Of like, oh, but it's so-and-so, but everybody, like, I'm like, oh my goodness, look how much you got accomplished. And right. And so it's always, you're always hardest on yourself, and especially when you're comparing yourself to others. So let's talk about the book. We were just talking, and I was given the incredible privilege to have an advanced reader copy. That was my first one ever. Can I just tell you, I feel like a total professional. It is so beautiful. Like I can't even, like it is literary. Like that's how I feel. Like it's right there. Yeah. And it's from, sorry, the dog has even like moved by it. She's howling. So it is very like, oh, just, I don't even have the words, but I just compared it a little bit, but in a completely unique voice, to The Secret Life of Bees, which was another so moving and so beautifully written book. And so I can't wait for this to come out and people to read it, because it's something super special, like really, really special. And then I can say, I knew you when. So how did you come about writing on this topic?
So so the book, a little background on the book, it's it's a literary fiction, or it's a historical fiction with sort of a literary lean. So it's set it spans 15 years. So the 1930s Great Depression era is sort of the bulk of that. And it features 2 sisters who are kind of growing up on a ranch, sort of in the shadow of like their famed outlaw grandfather. So they're sort of coming up in this, and a mysterious preacher comes through town and sort of starts this fascination with them, and he sort of dogs them through the next 15 years of their lives. So it's set in sort of a nebulous Western setting, kind of based a little bit on where I grew up. I grew up moving a lot, but I spent most of my adolescence, pretty much all of my adolescence, in a very small town in Wyoming. It's a town called Afton, Wyoming. It's very close to Jackson Hole, a few hours from Yellowstone, so right in the mountains. And it is a town with a very predominant religion. And so I kind of grew up with the shadow of like religion sort of all over in my life, and like these stories of like outlaws, and most importantly, like a lot of the voice of the sisters comes from listening to my grandparents talk about like their childhood and their mothers and grandmothers, and the stories that they would tell me sort of when I was sitting there. And so you'll notice it is a dual point of view, and one of the sisters speaks in first person present tense, which I know a lot of people are very like about. I also am like iffy about present tense, but I noticed that's the way that my grandfather would speak and tell a lot of his stories from his childhood, was speaking in first person present tense. So I kind of have to thank him for giving Isaiah, that's the sister, who that voice. So that's sort of the background of the book, and the moment that sort of got it going. I was in grad school and I had procrastinated writing a short story for a fiction class. And I think I started writing at about 10 o'clock at night, and it was due the next day at 6 p.m. And I had been having a conversation with a friend, and I was like, hey, what about a girl named Isaiah? Like way before either of us was naming children, we just were like throwing around names. And she's like, I don't know, I guess it's fine. And then I was like, oh, but like she would also have a sister named Genesis. And that's sort of like where the characters came from. And from there, I sort of went with, well, who would give their kids these names? Like, where would they live? What sort of world would these two sisters grow up in? And that was sort of the first spark. And then, I wrote it very quickly for this class. And it was supposed to be a brevity class. So it was supposed to sort of be like flash fiction vignettes. It ended up being about 10 or 11 pages long. And I just like kept writing and couldn't stop writing, and I couldn't stop thinking about the characters. And I know it sounds so cliche, but I just like could not get the story out of my head. And and my professor was just like, whoa, like this is like the rawest thing you've ever written. And I was like, dang, because I never wanted to write about the West and rural people and like blue collar life. Like that is not what I thought literature was about. I thought people wanted literary works about middle class people lamenting about how hard it was to be middle class in New York City. And so like I was like, nobody wants to read this. And then I just like had so much apparently that I needed to get on the page about rural Western life. So that ended up becoming my thesis. I had gone in with the intention of writing a thesis that was like very literary, contemporary, sort of mother-daughter struggle novel. It changed halfway through grad school, and I ended up sticking to that. And so that's sort of where the book came about. And it was fun to write. It took me about a year. I honestly like took me over. All of my MFA colleagues will tell you like they wrote 150 pages and my thesis was 350.
That's amazing. Like it obviously needed to come out, but like look at Faulkner. Look what he wrote. Right? Like I'll never forget studying As I Lay Dying and the whole process. And it's one of the American greats. So people want to hear about these other voices, right? Other experiences. Yeah. So it's like I said, it's right up there with them. Like it's amazing. I can't wait for people to get their hands on it. So how much of it is is it the book the same as your thesis, or have you changed it for
it's pretty much the same. Yeah, I did kind of light revising, cutting a few thousand words here and there, and beefing up some stuff. So I did with my editor recently, I did kill off another character at the end that hadn't been killed off, but we decided that they needed to go for that like big oomph. But I was really sad about it. That was the first time I've ever been like, I don't want to kill off this character. But yeah, so spoiler if you haven't gotten there yet. Somebody does at the end.
Yeah. So sorry, so you used an editor who obviously had nothing to do with your program. Like this was postgraduate editing.
Yeah. So I guess a little bit more about the journey of the book. So I wrote the book pretty much through 2017. I graduated December 2017, and gave myself, I think I gave myself like a year to revise it. I don't think I took that whole year, but I think I actually put it away for quite a while because I graduated and then we ended up moving, and then I started teaching, and I did not know what I was doing with that.
That's a lot.
So
Moving is one of the biggest stressors of life, right? And graduating university is another stress, and starting a family is another stress, and all these things. So yeah.
So it was probably by the end of 2018 that I started querying it. And I have a spreadsheet somewhere that just has all the numbers, but I can't remember exactly how many people and small presses I queried, but I think I only got about 5 full requests. I did actually get to meet with an agent through AWP's writer to agent program at their conference. That agent did request a full manuscript, and then I never heard from them again. So got a little bit ghosted on that one, but it was probably one of my first queries, so it was okay. I wasn't expecting too much to come out of that. And then it was 2018. So 2019 was when I really started to get more serious about querying. I wasn't super vigilant about it. I think I maybe queried like 1 or 2 agents a month, and then I would just submit to like small presses every now and then, mostly to like contests. And it wasn't until 2021 that I think Running Wild reached out. So it took about 3 years, 3 years to get a bite on it, or to get a publishing contract, I guess. So I ended up not having an agent, but I've been really happy with the small press that I'm working with.
Yeah. So sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt. Go on.
Yeah, no, so they've picked it up, and I'm working with Running Wild. And then Rise is one of their imprint presses that is more focused on diversity. So getting diverse voices and publishing from diverse voices.
Perfect.
Which I think is funny because all the people in my book are white. So I'm always like, it's great that you're publishing. Like, I know I'm diverse. My book is not. So I feel like I'm going to already get like questions or comments about people being like, she's writing about white people, and I'm like, yeah, I am. I actually went to a conference once, and there was a woman who was writing about, she wrote a historical fiction. I can't even remember what the name of the book was, but she wrote a historical fiction, and she had a dual POV, and one was from like the slave servant and one was from like the master, and it was like first person. And she said a lot of people commented and being like, how do you feel writing from the perspective of a white lady? And she was like, I mean, white people write from the perspective of people of color all the time. So so I'm always like, yeah, it's like the people in my book are white, but I am like only partially white. But yeah, so Rise is, if there are any writers out there interested in, diverse voices, own voices, Rise is the press for that. But Running Wild is their other imprint as well.
So RIZ, or for you Americans, RIZE, yeah, Running Press. So if you hadn't been signed with Running Press and then their imprint, would you have considered just going for it and putting it on, through Amazon, or what would you have done?
No, I think I would have still held out. I did, I had one of my professors was like, if I have an agent who's like interested in Westerns, if you are like interested in that. And but he was like, oh, but the agent's not that good, so have it as a last resort. So I was like already like, oh, if this isn't going to work out, I didn't have a timeline, so I think that helped me not like be worried that it wasn't going to happen.
Yeah.
I just gave myself a lot of time to be patient and like not expect anything, which I know is really hard to do, to like not have any expectations. But I had really wanted an agent, and it just wasn't working out. It was just, I think I just wasn't finding the right agents, and so I ended up going with a small press. And yeah, I'm happy with them. I researched them. I talked to other people that had been with small presses and was like, hey, so yeah, it was, if anyone that wants to go with a small press, like do the research, see what you can find on them. If they let you speak to other authors in their repertoire,
yeah,
let them, if they let me see a copy of the contract before I signed. So if there are some that we've seen some of the controversy of, there has been, I don't know if you're on the writing Twitter at all, but there was some controversy a few months ago about bad small presses that wouldn't let you talk to their authors or read the contracts beforehand.
That's so crazy.
Yeah, and like the founder, Lisa, oh gosh, what's her last name? Oh no, I'm blanking. I feel like I need to go with it. Kastner.
Lisa, what was
Lisa
her?
Kastner? It's Kastner.
Yeah, I've heard that name before. Yeah.
So she's the founder, CEO of Running Wild. And she actually met with me. We actually had a Zoom, and she answered all my questions and like told me about the company. She also writes. So she very much, she made me feel very comfortable with the decision to go with them. So, I just think they've just been very open and transparent. And whenever I email, they email so quickly. They have editors at their disposal who are also writers. So that was who my editor was through, was with them. Didn't take any money from me. So that's another like big red flag. If you have a publisher asking for money, stay away from that.
Yeah. Definitely. I just actually had that conversation with someone today who was telling me that someone they know is going that route. And I'm like, oh man, really? Like, so anyway, so benefits of working with a small press. What would you say the benefits are over the self-publishing aspect, right?
Well, self-publishing, you're fronting all the costs. So probably one of the biggest benefits is you shouldn't be paying anything. There is sort of more responsibility on you to do some marketing. But you're not responsible for all of it. So like you don't have to cover the cost of printing. depending on the size of the small press, they'll probably have in-house editing as well. And yeah, they tend to give, or at least the press that I'm working with, I think has a higher percentage that they per book sell than I probably would get if I went with like a big five. I mean, it probably evens out because big five has larger distribution. But yeah, so I get a more of a cut probably. There's fewer hands sort of in the money bag. And then it's right there, they don't have as long of a client list, so they're able to sort of be more focused on you, and give you the attention that you kind of need, especially as a debut author, I think, and you're not sure exactly how it all works, right? They're much, they get back pretty quickly. So that has been my experience with the press that I've been going with.
I'm writing all of this down because this is great information. So yeah, if you want to play the long game, right? And some people don't, and that's why they go and they just publish themselves. But like you, if you want, you weren't in a rush, you had a full-time gig, like these things. So you weren't concerned about the length of time it took to get picked up. So, and I mean, some people never will, but the other thing is to also broaden your horizon. So maybe if you aren't getting any traction in your country, you could go to another country, right? Like you could become a hit in New Zealand, let's say, or something like that. So explore the market. But this is wonderful because you're still like an indie in a way, because I do consider like small press authors, because you are kind of doing a lot of stuff yourself, like the marketing. I know I have another friend, he writes poetry and is with a smaller press, and he's constantly out, setting up his own events and things like that. So it's like almost like a hybrid in a way, but he doesn't need an agent, and that's great. So he still has control over his the events that he does. So there are like, it does allow you to maintain some independence, I guess, or control over the process. But then like, this is great that you don't have to put money into certain aspects, right? This is wonderful. So like, did they consult with you on cover design?
Yeah. So it was, and that was kind of a fun exercise for me, and like learning to speak my mind about like what I want. And again, they've been like so great, but I got a cover design, and I was like, oh, look, this is nice, I guess. It had wheat on it, which doesn't really grow in the Rocky Mountains, like in the Intermountain West where I was. And I was like, oh, it's pretty, I guess. And then I like showed it to some friends who were like, this doesn't make any sense. And I was like, okay, I had to email back, and I was like, I'm so sorry. I did the very millennial thing. I was like, I apologize for existing. But I just like, I'm sorry, but I was thinking about it. And this book, like the cover just isn't going to work for like, it just doesn't make sense. So I gave them some inspiration, and I was like, wheat doesn't grow there. Like, I need mountains on the cover. There weren't any mountains. It was just like a wheat field with a house. And I was like, this is really cute if it was like going to be set in Kansas. But,
right. I was actually thinking like Saskatchewan, like, or Alberta, where, in Canada.
And so, and then they, went a little bit back and forth. And I was like, I'm so glad that I did. And it was sort of in my year of my own kind of like year of yes. I don't know if you've read that book by Shonda Rhimes, or it's like, the year of yes. She talks about her, she's just gonna say yes to everything, or maybe it's no. I remember. I think it's the year of yes, but there is a section on like saying no to stuff as well, to get the yes that you want. And so that was sort of I was like, I'm turning 30. I need to be like back in 2020. I was like, I'm gonna be 30. I need to like be more outspoken about the things that I want. So
it's good to do it young. It's good to do it young because you get burnt out. If you, as you age and you're not advocating for yourself, you get really tired.
Yeah. So
Speaking from
yes, that was probably like my first like big thing where I was like, no, I have to tell them like this isn't what I want. Like I was like, the worst that they're gonna do is be like, no, we're not gonna do
Yeah,
yours.
we're using the
Like,
wheat, and that's it. But it's so funny that they'd be like, okay, yeah, Western, oh, wheat, because that that like, haven't you ever watched any of the?
I think like people, yeah, I'm just like, it's very cold. Like, I mean, where I grew up, like we grew corn one year and it like froze. So it only grew to about like 3 feet tall. But, so it's like, I think it's a place that not very many, like right in the heart of the Rocky Mountains, not a place that very many people go to
Right.
or recognize. They think of like, the Mormons settled there, so we're just not going to go there. And so like, I don't think a lot of people really know much about the landscape other than like, they see it sometimes.
I'm glad that you stuck to your guns with that one. Yeah, because I mean, like a cover, if it doesn't make sense, that it really, like some covers have nothing to do with the content, but they're just visually striking, right? But then if you have a cover that represents something, you're like, oh, I'm going to be reading about a farm, and then the farm never manifests itself or whatever, and you're like, what was this about? So I'm glad you got it changed to be more appropriate. Yeah. So next thing. So why would a person not, and this is not like, why would you do that? I'm asking like to pursue an MFA, like what, to continue on? Because like I got my undergrad in English and I wanted to go on, but I didn't. And so, yeah.
Yeah, so the whole reason I pursued, I mean, my big step one reason, I just wanted to teach college. And I knew that I needed to get an MFA degree to do that. When I first started writing, and when I went to college, I had no intention of ever teaching. I did not want to go to grad school. And when I was in my undergrad, I also emphasized in creative writing, sort of knowing that it wasn't going to be a very lucrative field, but it was what I really wanted to do. And so I thought maybe I would go into like editing or like publishing. And I just didn't, one couldn't afford it. But I didn't really want to live in LA or New York. And I was just like, I don't know if that's for me. And I was like, it was just a really long road to do that. And sort of, I think I was probably a sophomore the first time. I had a professor that I really liked. And I was like, oh, maybe I could be a professor. But I was like, I don't want to teach and I don't want to go to grad school. So I just like put it out of my mind. And then I graduated and I took about I think it was a year or two. I ran off to France and was a nanny, and I got married and like couldn't decide what I want to do. I ended up working at a university again, just like in administration. And I did not like office work. Like I don't really like 9 to 5 office work. But I really loved being on campus. I really loved just sort of like the atmosphere of academia and like being on campus and like just all of the stuff that comes with like college. And so I was like, well, maybe I will be a professor. And I like thought about it more and I was like, well, I am married internationally. My husband is English. And so like, we weren't sure exactly where we were going to settle, and we're still not sure where we're going to settle. And so I was like, I also need a job that's I can do anywhere without having to get retrained.
Yeah.
And then we were like, someday potentially we might have a family, so we need something that's going to be flexible with that. And so it just sort of like professor just kind of kept popping up. And so I decided to go for a master's. I wasn't intentionally going for an MFA. It sort of worked out. I was looking at schools, particularly in Chicago, because the company my husband was working for had a branch in Chicago. So I was narrowing my search there, and looking around, and a lot of them are very expensive. And I reached out. So I started emailing some of the like department chairs, and most of them didn't email back, or they emailed me back with a link to their page, like their information page. A lot of them didn't have any sort of funding for MFAs, but they were asking $40,000 a year. And I was like, I don't know if I can do that. And then, or just any MAs at all. I also was like, I don't want to write a dissertation. So I was like, I don't know if I want to write an MA, but like, if I have to, I will. And then like one emailed me back, like a personal email, and, gave me all the information and said like, hey, we don't have that much money. Like, it's not going to be fully funded, but we do have some funding. Like, everyone gets at least a few $1,000s for their scholarship. And so I was like, cool. I applied there. It was the only place I applied to because, they're $80 an application. It was also ended up being the cheapest, and I got in, and he called me again and was like, hey, I just want to like let you know, like, you're in. And it was very personable. And yeah, so that's sort of how I got into an MFA.
That's a great story.
Yeah. So it ended up being a really good experience. It was a very small program. I think they have about 12 people. They let in about 12 people per year. And there were like 2 full-time professors. So I was sort of seeing the same 2 people for 2.5 years. And they had some other adjuncts that came in and out. But yeah, so I got to be really good friends with the people I was there with. I had a reading group that's just sort of built in, and I still email, one of them and like, hey, I have a new manuscript for you if you want to read it. And, they'll email me as well and let me read their stuff. And so there's that. And then like because of that, I had several eyes on it. So it was a pretty polished manuscript by the time I left. So that was a big benefit. I mean, you can also get an editor that isn't going to cost you $15,000, but and take you 2 years to do it. But so you can also do that. So that is, for me, it was really great, like, networking experience. I'm an introvert, so I am terrible at networking. I also didn't know anybody growing up who wrote or like had any experience in that field. So I was sort of going into writing from ground zero. And so for me, college has always been just a good place for me to grow just in my networking and learning to write. It was at my MFA that I discovered that I write best about rural places and like historical fiction, like, and the program where I was, like, they were also really good about like, write what you want to write and didn't try to sort of pigeonhole us all into being the next like JD Salinger and like, right. They were just very much like, if you want to write sci-fi, we're going to try and help you figure out how to write the best sci-fi that you can write. Or
that's fantastic.
Yeah. And so, I read a lot of different types of stories there because all of my colleagues wrote something different. And so, yeah, they were very encouraging about like, this is your place. Like, this is what you write so well about. Like, this is what you should write. Because I also was like, I don't think historical fiction's like literary, right? Like, it's a thing that like moms read. And so moms who like aren't into romance read historical fiction novels. And but yeah, so I'm like, oh, I guess I'm a historical fiction writer. Like,
it's a great genre to write in. But what a magical experience, because I remember in my undergrad, like, if it weren't, part of the canon or whatever, it was not encouraged, right? And I remember looking through the catalog one year online. I'm not that old that it was when I started university, there was some paper-based stuff still, but I was looking through, the course catalog, and there was one for mystery, right? And I'm like, oh my, am I reading this right? And so I took it and they were like, yeah, it's pretty, groundbreaking that we even have this program, because no one was talking about, because it wasn't considered serious. So for you to have someone say, yeah, if you want to be a sci-fi writer or whatever, like go for it. Like that is so refreshing, because for so long, there is a lot of like snobbery in English, like courses, like not learning to speak English, but at the university level, there's a lot of like, oh no, this is, and they besmirch all these major authors' names in the different classes, and I was like, how is this right? Like, are we supposed to all be in this together?
It's so straight. It's always like, I feel like, I think it's getting better now, but like I feel like it's always been like, either you are very literary, you're going in the vein of like Fitzgerald and Steinbeck, and you're just very serious, or you're on the complete opposite spectrum of like avant-garde, like turning in blank pages at your worksheet, like, right? Like,
and you're like, this, here you go. And they're like,
I know, it's like you're making a statement, and like, and there was never really like a middle ground. It's like, I want to write, beautiful words that also have a plot. So.
Yeah, exactly. And not be like leaving you like, what did I just read? Like, honestly, what did I just read? And there was another course that I took, and this was eye-opening. This is when I knew, like, okay, something's not right with this, like the way the academics look at mainstream writing. So we had to take for a breadth requirement, right? So basically there's all these courses that you have to take that are outside your specialty, so that you have somewhat of a well-rounded education. So one of the breadth requirements was, for some reason, natural science. I have no idea why they would think that would be a good one, but anyway, so I tried to take atmospheric science, because I was like, oh yeah, the weather, that sounds great. Horrible. I had to drop it because I was like, I don't know what I'm doing. Like, anyway, so I found one that was science fiction and science factor. It was something like that. Right. And I'm like, oh, I could get behind this. And so we were reading science fiction books. And so that was where I was interviewed to, oh my gosh, and I'm going to get killed because I can't remember, Philip
K. Dick?
Yes. I didn't want to say it wrong because I was like, is it Dyke? Is it Dick? Do androids dream of electric sheep? Like that all, and that Jules Verne and all that, right? And I'm like, oh my gosh, this is so great. This is kind of what I wanted to come to university to study, but I had to take it as a natural science program. It was demented.
Yeah.
Yeah. And it wasn't part of the English program at all. Like, anyway, so we could go on and on about the weirdness of, but you're right. There is something very magical about being on campus. It's all filled with hope and youth and enthusiasm and
too much caffeine and like,
but it's a magical place. Like being on a university or a college campus, it has this vibe. I don't know what it is. And it just makes you feel good, or filled with, self-doubt, which was my entire university experience. But and you get to be there every day or whatever you have a lecture or whenever you're meeting with students, so that's great.